Good evening. Thank you for joining me. My camera is acting weird, so in case this ever shows up upside down, I apologize. But at least the sound will be fixed. So this is my redo of my GM Burnout video. What is GM Burnout? Well, like with everything, this is when you devote too much time and effort into a particular thing to the point where you become sick of it. So what do I believe causes it, and how can we fix it? Now, I realize I'm not the first person on YouTube to really cover this subject. In fact, there's a glut of this stuff, in addition to many videos of how to be a first time GM. And that's where my first point particularly gets to. That is, people coming into the hobby that are getting bad advice from, in my opinion, very bad game masters. Now, you're going to think that's inflammatory, but I have a point. And that is because these people that run these games and will give these advices will then get on social media and then complain about being burnt out on everything in the world to the point where their campaigns die because they decided they were going to take a 3 or 4 month hiatus. Taking hiatuses is not my answer to how to solve burnout, by the way. So we're going to talk about how to fix these bad advices. The bad advice, first and foremost, is the whole. They will tell you you're not going to write a novel in one sentence, and in the very same video, 2 or 3 minutes later, they will tell you that everything has to make narrative sense, even to the point of railroading your players to where they only die if it makes narrative sense. This is terrible advice. In a campaign, you should have a level of verisimilitude to where people can die through seemingly senseless things. It happens in the real world all the time. For example, there's a reason why if you check the bottle of any kind of chemical, tells you not to ingest it. There's a reason why they tell you not to drink and drive. There's a reason why certain medicines tell you not to operate heavy machinery after you take it. People do these things and they get hurt or killed. So sometimes you are the adventurer that conquers the dungeon, sometimes you're the skeleton that's in the dungeon. So I want people that are coming into the hobby to get that particular bit of bad advice out of the way. Now you probably think, how am I better than these people? My games don't die this way, number one. So my second point, what I think causes GM burnout. Many people come into this hobby with a level of OCD, and I understand it, because to be honest, you kind of have to be a little bit crazy to be a game master. You're going to be running something you create that you really like for other players to enjoy, although you are going to enjoy it as well, just not in the same degree they are. You're going to pretend to be their best friend in the town, and then when they go in the dungeon, you're going to be their worst enemy. But the OCD thing I'm referring to specifically is that people believe you either have to run all modules or all homebrew, never both. You'll be very surprised at how prevalent that thought is. And everything I've seen on social media and everything I've seen in blogs, I've seen that problem come up a lot. And I understand it to a degree, but realize that we're not Gary, you're not Gary Gygax, you're not Dave Arneson, okay? What you're writing is more likely not going to make it into a campaign book one day. You're running a game for your friends. As such, homebrew when you think you should, run modules when you think you should. I've run all homebrew, I've run all modules, and I've run a mix and match. And by far, the mix and match was the most fun for me because it took a lot of prep work off of me. So don't be afraid to use modules if you're running homebrew world, or if you're running a modular world, don't be afraid to spread your creative wings. You'll be surprised what kind of good ideas you have, which brings me to my next point. I think what causes GM burnout is people get discouraged because they overthink and they over-prep. They think you have to be this artist, or that you have to be this creative mind to really get into this hobby and run a game for people. Let me tell you something from somebody on the other side of the screen. You'll be very surprised at how often we rip things off or outright steal. We do. And if anybody tells you we don't, they're lying. So if you find yourself in a creative rut, don't be afraid to watch a movie. Don't be afraid to read a book. Definitely pick that stuff up. Now, what I think can help fix some of these issues that I have brought up today is, number one, we need better advice being put out into the hobby than what we have been getting. We go on any, and I understand that part of this problem is a modern gaming philosophy kind of thing, but at the same time, it's strange to me because I have some modern edition books. I have some modern games. and they all provide tables and things for you to run non-linear sandboxy adventures. Now, this is not a knock on linear adventures, but my point being that you have the things to where you don't need to make everything make narrative sense. Now, if you are leaning towards running a narrative game, let me tell you something that you should keep in mind. Linear adventures work because they're short, sweet, and to the point. They don't last more than two, three, maybe 4 sessions, and they're done and over with. There's a reason people like Ravenloft but hate Dragonlance. It's because Dragonlance was an entire setting that was set up around a railroad, whereas Ravenloft, while it did have some railroady things in it, it had more freedom. But it was an adventure that you could get through within 3, 4, sometimes 5, depending on schedules, sessions. It wasn't no big deal to run. I think more games should come out and be more out there and open with being sandboxes instead of narrative driven games. I think that if you are going to stick a label such as Game Master Resource or Dungeon Master Resource or Dungeon Master Handbook or whatever, the first paragraph in your book should be within these pages or contain tables that will give you everything you need to run a game. Have fun. And I think there should be sections where if somebody is planning on running a narrative driven, story driven game, then it gives that precisely that advice that everything should be short, sweet, to the point if you are going to run a more narrative focused adventure. Do not make your whole entire campaign a story. That's a terrible idea. And it will. This is why a lot of sessions fail. And this is why a lot of people get burnt out. And this is why these supposed influencers that make money doing this, as I don't make any money doing this, uh, that's why you will see them get on Twitter and Facebook and gripe and complain about how they're burnt out, and they've taken a 3-4 month hiatus. Now my games are on hiatus right now, but that's only because I'm currently dealing with work related situations. Uh, so personal things, nothing to do with the game, nothing to do with being burnt out. Life happens. What I also think will help our module problem is that we need more books, because this was very prevalent in the old school days, because I have several old school modules on my computer or in print in the room over there, where they did not necessarily have a setting. They did more of a placeholder. If you decided you had your own world, you could drop that module into that world, and it wouldn't require a lot of tweaking, if it required tweaking at all. We need more system and setting agnostic modules released today in this age that will help game masters more. And I think that the only thing that we can really do to help the whole creativity issue, quote unquote, is to be open and honest about the fact that we do take things from different resources all the time. Don't be afraid to do it. Many of my stuff is taken from these old 1950s, 1960s booger movies, what I call horror movies. The old school Frankenstein, Mummy, and Dracula and all that. So, like, I'm pretty open about that. Most game masters are from back then. You should be more open to running a Conan the Barbarian style game than you are Lord of the Rings. This is not a knock on Lord of the Rings. This is a knock on the fact that people think they have to have the highest fantasy setting for their Dungeons and Dragons or whatever other fantasy based system they're running. Um, they think they have to have this Lord of the Rings simulator. You don't have to have that. The reason that people do not take your game so seriously is because you take yourself too seriously. So, where I will differ with these influencers that are shilling for companies like Wizards of the Coast and stuff like that, where I will differ from them is I will tell you, you're not a novelist. If you want to write a book, write a book. Don't bring it to your game table. If you're going to run a game, steal freely. You're not Gary Gygax. You're not Dave Arneson. Your setting and your campaign is most likely not going to be published in a book somewhere one day. That's just a matter of fact. Run a game to make your players have fun. Give them something they're going to have fun with. You have somebody who likes dungeon crawlers, feel free to take from B2. You have somebody that's more interested in intrigue or the political game, read Game of Thrones and steal that kind of stuff from them. You know, like you can do all this. It's your game. What are you expecting? A lawyer to come up to your table and hand you a lawsuit? Don't be worried about that. Run your game and run it the way you want to. Thank you guys for listening. I believe I've said all I need to say. I want to thank you guys for having patience because that video when I tried this last time sounded terrible. So hopefully this will be up soon. Feel free to interact, give feedback, leave any questions and comments down in the comments section. As always, guys, take care. God bless, and I'll see you on the other side.